fantastic to be here. As announced, I'm from Dingley Village. I'm a local boy. I used to go surf at Flinders when I was growing up, and I've worked on movies like Finding Nemo. Back in the day, I went to the beach and I would draw. I'd bring stuff back from that experience of like shells and starfish. And later in my career, when I was working on Finding Nemo, they sent me to Hawaii, and I went and I drew on the beach and I looked at starfish and other types of creatures. So this is a very special place to me. I'm very happy to be here. Down in Mornington Peninsula with my sister at the moment, and I'm just reminded that we're in this incredibly beautiful environment, and it's an inspirational environment. So my talk is going to be a little bit as a talk that hasn't been done before. It's about the evolution of, it's a technological story, and, oh, no recording. Oh, that's a bummer. I was on a roll. With all your devices. There we go. We got past the legality. All right, so 3 minutes about me. I was born in a country called Tanganyika. It doesn't exist anymore. It's now Tanzania. I grew up in Melbourne. I now live in San Francisco. I've worked on a lot of the movies perhaps you've seen. I've been a character supervisor for Toy Story 3, for Ratatouille, for Finding Nemo. I've done a number of characters like Nemo and Remy and Sullivan, and I've just been very fortunate. And the reason I have this slide up for you is because you're on a creative journey. And for me, in an outer suburb of Dingley, it seemed impossible to go to any of these places, to go work for Disney, to go be in America. And it's not impossible. So this slide is really about encouragement for you that wherever you are in your creative journey, anything's possible, because it was possible for me. And for me, it was just like, hard work and a little bit of passion and some good lucky timing. So anyway, that's the slide about me. Hopefully it's encouraging to you. What am I passionate about? I'm passionate about characters. So if you go to a movie, there's two things you remember from a movie typically. You remember the story and you remember the characters. I'm not good at story, but I could make characters. I'm infinitely fascinated by characters. I've done 20 years at Pixar. And the thing that's fascinating about characters is it's about us. So I might be working on a fish, and the fish is displaying emotions, and we display emotion. So I'm just looking out in the crowd at everybody, and I'm seeing a lot of different emotion, and there's quizzical, and there's kind of bored, and there's someone who, missed lunch, and so they're, hungry. And us relating as humans is fun, because we look at each other and we relate. And that's what we're trying to do here with the characters at Pixar. We're trying to get you to relate to these characters, and we're trying to get you to fall in love with these characters. And, this is a business conference. We want you to buy the characters. So I look at this little slide here, creative tech business, and Pixar, what's Pixar? Creative, John Lasseter, genius. Technical, Ed Catmull, he was a pioneering genius. And business, Steve Jobs. So this conference I'm intrigued by because these are three elements that made Pixar great. And here's a conference that we're talking about these three elements, and you get a chance to expose it all. So I'm not paid by the conference, but I just thought I'd throw it in because I thought it was kind of cool looking up here. Anyway, so moving on. So my technical story I'm doing today is I want to talk about tentacles. So I worked on, Sully, and originally when Pete Docter was inventing this movie, he said, I want monsters to be hairy, I want tentacles, and I want fog. And we're like, okay, let's do it. So we started designing up, these monsters, which were hairy and had tentacles, and we added fog in. And to solve the problem of making these tentacles real, we needed to do two things. We had to make them physical, believable, and we also had to, allow them to act. So we went into research mode. What's the physical believability about these tentacles? What's the aspect of them that will make our characters feel grounded? Because if our characters are not physically believable, they're not vulnerable. If they're not vulnerable, you're not emotionally invested in them of what's going to happen to them in the movie. So we're near Monterey. It's this brilliant aquarium. We, of course, went down and had a look at all the characters. It's fun trips. We'd film them, and we'd just research. What is it about tentacles that's difficult? Okay? So that's one component. Our characters need to feel grounded. They need to have believability. They are cartoon characters, but they need to be vulnerable. The next thing we needed to do was to make them act. So we have animators, and the animators do these brilliant animated performances. So the tentacles themselves had to convey emotion. And so if you're just looking for this, you can see that the tentacles can be expressing emotion. They can be rigid when the character's tense. They can be loose. So they're the arms of the character. So we had to solve both problems. But what happened? So here we are. We did all this research on tentacles. We were also working on hair. We got Sullivan. And where we ended up was we can't solve all the problems on the movie. So we redesigned Sullivan to be bipedal. And then we concentrated on hair. And Steve Jobs had this thing of being like, you got to do one thing great. You can't do two things that are mediocre. And so he pushed us to do hair that's great. And there's a lot of talks about the hair and how we did it and how much and the simulation thing. But what happened to the tentacles? So we have technological problems that we pursue over a number of years. So there's a number of elements that we needed to bring together so we could do tentacles really well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about history, and then we see this character Hank where we brought it all together in Finding Dory. So one of the early things we needed to do was solve jiggles and fat. So if you have tentacles, you need to have a simulator that will allow them to move realistically. So we had this movie which gave us what I call a technical opportunity, where it allowed us to solve fat jiggles and to run simulations and do collisions, of course. And just practical problems we need to do is, like, it's a big movie and we've got to run it on our render farm. So our render farm has got 1 billion computers and we're kind of proud of showing it off because it's got so many computers in. How can we use this to solve some of our character problems? So we had to build a pipeline to do that. So here's one movie that allowed us to advance a little closer to our goal of having, tentacles in the movie. Then we had another movie, it was Brave. So we needed to integrate these tentacles with acting. So Brave, we had a secondary character who was very important. So we were able to add in, at a higher level, we were able to take on the challenge of how do we do acting and how do we add simulated elements and how do we have the simulated elements not hide the acting, because it's easy for them to become the focus. And so this was a chance for us to be having simulation, accenting the acting rather than overriding it. So that was a great movie to work on, and there's lots of stuff online showing how we did that. Then we had another movie. So we're getting a pipeline going for simulation, and we were able to do it effectively and add all these jiggles. What about that? So that gives us the physical believability. We need to get back to the acting stage of this. So we had Monsters University that came out, and we're back to tentacles. And so we started creating a lot of tools for the animators, which allowed them to act with it. So on one side, we got physical believability. On the other side, we have tentacle acting. And then we got, we're evolving closer to a full solution. And then, this is just a fun movie. It was fun to work on. See the characters again. So finally, Hank. So Hank is the character, of course, in Finding Dory. He's missing a tentacle. And here's a character that finally the director says, we want to bring all this together, all this type of stuff that you've been building up over the years. And we're like, fantastic. It's our opportunity to get all these different pipelines and bring them together. So we're kind of back to the drawing board of being like, let's go back and research tentacles. So we went out to dinner, right? And we ordered tentacles. And the thing I like about this shot is, look how bendy this tentacle is, but the sucker keeps itself rigid. So we looked at them, and we're like, what is there about this tentacle that we need to solve? So we're looking deeply at the problem. And then the question, of course, is who's going to eat the tentacle, right? That's part of, the fun of a good team. I did not eat it. Whew. Anyway, so these are all the slides, the things that we found that we need to solve. We've got skin simulation, we have complexity, we've got suckers, we've got a mantle with a big fin on the back. So we found all these problems, and we divided them all up amongst the groups. So here's us doing our research and going and finding what the problem is. We also were like, hey, there's other groups out there who've solved this. So we have our friends up the road from us. They did this fantastic movie, Davy Jones. Hey, it's got tentacles and there's acting in it. Let's go talk to them. So up we go. It's good a chance to, see Rogue One and all that type of stuff go up there. So we talked to them. They talked to us. Collaboration. And then from that, we had to find a solution. So we started attacking each of the problems. So what we see here is it's called a tetrahedral mesh. And it's all these little cubes. And it's all these little cubes we can use for simulation. And that can add all the jiggles. Now we have to iterate to find the right number of cubes. So that worked great for the body. but we have different parts of the body. So we have the mantle, which is at the back of the head, and it's like that needs a different set of motion and different set of cubes. So we looked all over the body, and we created different, what we call tetrahedral meshes that we create from level sets. So creative, technical, I'm going to throw in some technical terms as we go again, because both of these components are important in making a character. Skin simulation, so we have all these little cubes that can bounce around. We've got multiple levels. We bring it all together with Skin Simulator that binds it all together, and it adds this kind of organic motion to it. Then meshing, so the suckers are a problem, right? They're really small, and we've got this giant character. We have this meshing, which gets all these artifacts that we've got to work on. We create a thing called Stiction. So Stiction is how do we create the volume? How do we not lose volume? Because if we lose volume and something grows, it doesn't feel believable. So we have to be very careful and make sure that everything we do respects the physics. So if something squashes and stretches, it has to squash and stretch mathematically correct, because we want to start from a place of believability. So here's another test. When the sucker comes off, it has to stick. It has to pop. So that's they're sticky. That's part of the material, and we got to respect the material. This is a thing John Lasseter always said. What is the material made of, and how can we respect it? So we do a lot of that. So that's our Stiction test. And then, of course, we have to do it across a lot of suckers. So we have to replicate the way we're solving this. And then you see kind of in the corner of this tentacle, there's problems, like how's it integrated into the body? So we're getting into like the depth of this. This has to, we got thousands of shots. We have to have all this happen automatically for the animation team. So here we are doing a lot of tests, trying to solve the problems for the movie. And then collision, right? So our characters integrate themselves in the environment. So a classic computer graphic problem is a character feels floating or doesn't press against this environment. And we're like, no, these characters got to live in this environment. And so we have to do like these crazy things of a character will grab the edge of an aquarium and everything has to collide. And when you pull off, the sucker, everything has to pop correctly. And then you as an audience will just be like, accept it all. Oh yeah, he feels integrated, things feel believable, and I'm enjoying the performance. But each of these elements done incorrectly can pull you out of the movie. So this is us trying to figure it out for each sucker. This is our proprietary rigging system that we use. And we got various people, mathematicians and programmers and artists, all who are involved in the system. Some are writing code. Some are doing other aspects. Finally, we need to take this for a test run. So Pixar is full of artists. A lot of them are traditional artists. Art is very important to us. We like to draw. We really love the 2D animators and all the experience they bring in. So they go ahead and draw a pencil test that we need to match. So this is one of our earlier pencil tests. And we go ahead and draw in the background, and then an animator will come and match our test. And doing the pencil test frees us up to just be expressive about what we're trying to achieve. And then doing the actual test on the character shows where we fall short. So if we can pass the pencil test, then we do a dialogue test and a body test. So here is Hank. I guess the sound's off. Here's Hank actually talking. And we have to lip sync with this character so we can actually read its motion. And then we want to do a physical test. So we're doing the same test. We did with a line of dialogue, and then we want to go ahead and do some acting. And so we've created all these special controls. So when you see this test, there's all these like magic balls that we can drag around. Dragging around a ball in three-dimensional space is very difficult. So we had to create a layer of tools on top of that, where the artist could draw the silhouette of what they want the tentacle to be, and then the system would figure out how to project that into 3D space. So one of the original problems that they were concerned about with Von Sullivan was it's just a lot of extra work doing all these extra tentacles. So we have to take into account budget, right? How can we create these systems that are fast enough, that the animators can work fast enough, that the movie can come out on time and we don't spend too much budget? So that's what these like magic balls are. And this is sophisticated math. It's, you're trying to hit a target in space. And so you have to figure out what we call inverse kinematic and the math behind that. So we have mathematicians who are, part of the rigging group. So here is the final Hank test. hopefully there's sound, or if there isn't, we'll just enjoy it as is. Go for it.
Hi, what's happening? Help!
Looks like we're done here.
Dude, cut it out. You're a scientist. We talked about this.
Oh, come on, it's funny.
Okay. This is probably fine. I just need to find a way out. Just get a hold of yourself. Be fine. Everything's fine. Think positively.
Hey, you.
So that was the tentacles that we solved, and this was one of many technical opportunities on the movie. We had a new ray tracer, so you could see how the character blended into the background, and there's a whole other technical story behind that. That's kind of fun. And these movies are fun because they're like these mad science experiments where you got to tackle these problems. And sometimes the problems take a long time to solve, so they might not be solved in one movie. We move forward, and the next movie might solve it. I mentioned I've been at Pixar a long time, so it's a fantastic opportunity that you can evolve solutions to problems over a long period of time. Having said that, you never do it in isolation. So the best art, I think, is done collaboratively. And here's the people who are all involved in some capacity to do it. And part of the pleasure of working on movies that I work on is you work on people who bring the unique strengths to this process. So I want to give them a thumbs up.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
for your time.
Okay.
And can we have a woohoo? That was worthy of a woohoo.